I'm talking about this from my perspective, because that's what it was for me. Once I opened up to my occupational health department, I felt I was getting some control back. I accepted the fact there were plenty of opportunities for me not to get as deep into that relationship as I did, including having her parents get together and beg me not to move to Scotland with her. But I ignored those, and I had my reasons for doing that.
Yeah.
But I did have the opportunities. But I can accept now that my decisions put me in that position. But of course, she took advantage of that.
That's fine. I'm just thinking that obviously if there's children involved, that complicates matters, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And later on, whilst we didn't have a child together, at that point, we did later on, which obviously really did then complicate things.
I mean, in my work before, as a chief officer on the ships and that, I came across it inevitably. I had crew members were affected, by separation and domestic abuse. Now, domestic abuse was very difficult to get any of them, and it was mainly a male workforce. I would say it's for any of them to come out and say, "Look, I'm getting problems from her when I go home," and that kind of stuff. They wouldn't talk about it. They'd have issues, and you had to be kind of very subtle and say, "You're not feeling very good today," that kind of stuff. Now, I was sort of that sort of person, pick up on these things, but at the time I had a smattering of understanding of some of the issues because of my advocacy work. I learned about that, and I remember, I'm not going to name obviously the person, but one person in particular had a really rough time with his other half, and she was carrying on behind his back and all sorts of stuff going on, and the financial thing was money was going out, and and what was going on when the door was closed, I don't know, but it wasn't nice. Okay, and so I took him aside because his performance had dropped and things like that. And I didn't remonstrate with him. I just said, we've got an issue. And we had a personal conversation which stayed within the four walls. And I said, you need to take time out to sort yourself off. And I gave him time off to go and sort himself out. And in spite of other people complaining. And I tell you what, it took a few months. But he was one of the best performing workers we'd got after that. Once he'd sorted it out of his life, got it out of his life and that kind of thing. He managed to, it wasn't a perfect solution. I think they separated in the end, and there were kids involved, and that wasn't very nice. That was an ugly thing. But in a way, he was away from the direct abuse that he was getting, and that was something, I
think you're a bit ahead of your time there, weren't you?
Well,
because that's the big thing now. Obviously, Vodafone have just.
But I think myself, your advocacy work, people should do a little bit of that just to learn about it. It should be part of management to understand what because if you work at, I don't know, the local Morrisons or something like that, you're going to have a load of workers and they've got a variety of issues. They're human beings, they're going to have problems, and it helps if you understand what their problems are. You don't have to say, well, take all the time off you need, but you understand what you're dealing with. It's a complex issue.
Yeah, sure.
And that's what I learned as well. And I found that, in actual fact, it had a knock-on effect, not because of anything else, but I had that sort of approach to management, and I found my workforce had less time off sick than anyone else's in the fleet. That was it,
Well, UK businesses are losing £2.7 billion a year through domestic abuse.
Yes.
And that's men and women, obviously.
So
to see companies like Vodafone and other companies now coming forward saying that they're going to give people time off. Extra time off for their domestic abuse to support them in other ways through HR as well. I think that's a positive move. But I did get into a bit of a debate with somebody online a couple of days ago who, it's the same old thing. We see the picture of the man standing over the woman with a clenched fist. And the article was about a company that was doing great work for domestic abuse.
It's interesting you say that because again, looking at my understanding of the stats and things like that and the reality, if it comes to a violent situation, and the stats show as well that very often it's the woman that initiates it. She doesn't necessarily finish it, but she'll there was a thing from Australia, I think it was. There was a good one which was there's a young couple, and he got arrested. I think they had 3 children as well, and the kids are crying. But he was into computer games, and she started throwing stuff at him, and he said, "Leave me alone, leave me alone, leave me alone." And then they gave up and gave her a whack after a long provocation. And then the police come, And it was almost like you looked at it and you think in the cold light of things, and perhaps I was trying not to be biased in looking at it, and I thought she was really provocative because it took a while for him to get up and say and do anything,
Yeah, I mean, I want to say quite categorically that I don't feel that there's any excuse, whether it's a man against a woman or a woman against a man, for actually becoming physically violent.
Yeah, well, she actually was violent. She whacked him with a cardboard and that, but it was again, it was, to me, I thought myself, in that situation, personally, if I was a police officer coming in that situation, I'd arrest both of them and take them to one side and say, who's done what, and then decide what. Because to me, there's a crime, if you like, being committed. But who's the perpetrator? You don't know. But maybe both of them need to be charged. I don't know.
Well, I've been in that situation on a number of occasions. So whether things have changed in the last 10 or 12 years, I don't know. But when an officer turns up, it was the same when I was a military police officer turning up to domestic situations. You separate the couple, you take them to different rooms, you get a story, you come together as officers, see if the stories match and try and work out what's happening. Forces have tried to implement certain things to help the officers out, and I'll give you an example. With my partner, we moved to Wiltshire from Hampshire, and there was an incident where Wiltshire police were called by the neighbours. When they turned up, without going into all the details, because we'll be here all day, the bottom line was that the force had introduced a policy whereby when you turn up to a domestic abuse situation, one person had to be removed from that situation. They didn't have to be arrested, they just had to be removed. So, encouraged to go to a family, a friend, a hotel, whatever that happened to be. So on this occasion, now, I think that's a great idea. However, when you look at domestic abuse and its controlling nature, I was living with my partner, but I wasn't allowed to be on the rent agreement.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So it was only her name on the rent agreement. So when the police turn around and they say, whose house is this? It's mine because I'm the one on the rent agreement. So you're not on the rent agreement? Obviously, no. So you're the one that's got to leave. So I'm being told I've got to leave. My partner is in control of my finances.
Yes.
You can see where this is going.
I see where it's going now,
Right, so I had very little money. There's a hotel down the end of the road. We'll drive you to that. You can stay there for the night. I can't afford a hotel for the night.
No.
Why should I go to a hotel for the night? This is my home. She didn't want me to leave. She said to them, I'm happy for him to stay. They said, no, force policy, one of you's got to go. You're not on the rent agreement, you are going. And at this point, both officers, who were both big guys, leapt on me on the sofa. I can only describe it as being roughed up. I was handcuffed. I was dragged half naked out of the house in the middle of winter. Thrown in the back of a patrol car. I spent a night in the cells, wasn't released till lunchtime the next day. That resulted in a personal apology from the, I think it was the chief superintendent, who came round to the house whilst my partner wasn't there, apologised and said the officers were receiving further training.
Well, I think so too.
But that doesn't alter what had happened. And when you are actually a victim of domestic abuse and something like that happens to you, you know, where do you go from there?
Well, I know. I mean, that's what I was saying. You know, they should. If you're not sure, then you take both of them. Not necessarily to arrest them, but to take them to, like you say, to separate rooms and sort it out. Because it shouldn't. The rent agreement shouldn't have anything to do with it. That's a separate issue.
But the hands, but as officers on the ground, their hands were tied because force policy states X, Y, and Z. Now, if they don't follow that through, they leave, and one of us murders the other one. Then obviously they're going to be, you know, in it big time.
I had a case. This is while I was a counsellor, and a young man came to me. It was rather late in the evening. And he had been excluded from. They had 4 children, young children, and he'd been excluded from the house, the home. I won't say any more than much like that. And what happened? There'd been a tragedy, and the tragedy was that the youngest, the baby, he'd been out at work, and she was on medication of some sort. They're both nice people. This is the thing; they were really nice people, because I did meet them both eventually. But anyway, and what happened was the baby. She put it on the baby on the bed, and the baby had rolled over between the bed and the radiator and suffocated and was killed that way. Well, he come home and, like a lot of men, women, whatever it is, do, had a beer and sat and watched the television and never thought anything of it. And then later they discovered, and she was under medication as well. She was a bit drowsy, and then they discovered this terrible thing that had happened. Mm-hmm. Well, of course, natural emotion is huge rage. This is a horrible, horrible tragedy that nobody could wish on anyone.
Yeah.
And so she went into rage and became aggressive and the rest of it. She was acting normally under the circumstances because it's not a normal circumstance. Anyway, eventually she called the police and said and claimed that he'd abused her, he'd hit her. Well, he'd restrained her, and I think he did hit her only just to slap her to try to calm her down. That was the way they did it.
Right.
But anyway, so that was the situation. So he was arrested, taken out, and excluded from the home, and that's why he came to me. And so I said, well, look, have you got a place to stay for night? Yes, okay. Well, can we meet for a coffee at the subway, your local subway, tomorrow morning or something, because it's obviously late. Yeah, okay. And then she came along, and I bought some coffee and we sat down. Before the first word she says, I attacked him. I didn't say anything to her at all.
Right.
I attacked him, and she explained the whole situation.
Yep.
And I thought, well, why didn't the police and the social service, because there's children involved, ask the woman what actually happened, interview them? And they hadn't bothered to interview anyone to find out. They just assumed this is the case.
Yeah, it's difficult because police officers, when they turn up to a scene, particularly these days, less so in my time, I think, are almost expected to act like social workers.
Yes.
There's a lot of form filling goes on these days, and officers are so undermanned. If a domestic abuse situation is happening on Friday night when they're already desperately short-staffed and they turn up, it's incredibly difficult for officers to try and sit down, take time and deal with it. But this is one of the things in my talks.
Yeah. You see, then in that situation, to me, there was a bit of violence both sides, but because of the circumstances, nobody should have been charged with anything, and then they should have, taken it as an exceptional situation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the particular individual case, so I can't really comment on that. But as a former police officer, I've been dealt with on a personal level very badly by police in 3 different forces in 2 different countries. And for me, it's all down to the stereotyping, which is why when I give my talks, one of the things I try to get across is to frontline staff, particularly police officers, is to just consider, when you walk through that door, consider for a moment, regardless of the man's size, his job, please consider for a moment that he may be the victim.
Yes.
Don't allow yourself to slip into the mentality, that's the whole stereotype. Particularly in the armed services, I've done a couple of talks now to members of the Royal Military Police, which I was a member of. Because particularly in the armed services, you've got big guys who ultimately are trained to kill. How can he possibly be the victim of his partner who could be half his size? Yeah. But it's a fact. It's going on. And during meetings, examples have been given of some really big guys who are being subjected to some really terrible abuse by their partners that are ongoing cases. So it absolutely does happen. But it is incredibly difficult for officers when they turn up. They're short-staffed, they're under pressure.